Marie, your host of the I Don't Think We Talk Enough About podcast. And today I'm so excited to welcome Julie Menanno. Julie is a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical professional counsellor and relationship coach. She currently has a clinical therapy practice treating couples in Montana, as well as a relationship coaching practice with a staff of coaches who serve clients all over the globe. Julie is trained in emotionally focused therapy for couples and specialises in working with attachment issues within relationships, the focus of our podcast and conversation today. While Julie's first passion is treating couples, she also provides an invaluable relationship insights and advice to over 1 million followers on Instagram. You may know her as the Secure Relationship. As a wife of 22 years and a mother of 6 children and 1 dog, Julie has a plethora of personal experience with attachment in relationships to augment her professional expertise. Whether you are single or in a relationship, I have a feeling that you will really enjoy this episode as I did. Julie brings in so generously tips and tools to work through communication, ruptures, trust, and just so much more. Her insight is such a resource. This is an episode for anyone who is interested in relationships, past and present. Enjoy. Julie, welcome to my podcast.
It's so great to be here.
Oh, it's so beautiful to finally see you. When I followed your account on Instagram, actually people here may know Julie as the Secure Relationship on Instagram, and you have a big presence over there, don't you? With how many followers? Remind me.
I'm at 1.2 million at this point. So
that's incredible.
Crazy.
And
feels really good.
Oh, it feels really good to those reading your posts.
Sure. Well, thank you.
You're resource, and I love the way, for those who don't follow you, I really recommend you go and have a look, because you really bring in both sides of the relationship the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the way you do, and I love the way you help us see our part in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You really do. So I really appreciate that. But the main reason I brought you on was I wanted to talk about your incredible book, Secure Love.
Great.
And that came out when, Julie?
That was released January 31st. So I can't even believe it. But it's been, I guess, almost 6 months now.
Oh, it's incredible. And I've literally used it as such a resource and recommended to so many people. It's a wonderful book. And
Thank you.
I love the way the book is for everyone. Someone who's in a relationship, someone who's looking back at past relationships, and someone who's single. It's there for everyone, isn't it?
I think so. I definitely packaged it for couples. Yes. And it is, pretty clearly a couples book. However, it is so applicable to people who are single and either want to make sense of past relationship problems, want to know what to do going forward. And even like you said, people who maybe aren't even interested in being in a relationship, there's so much self-healing, I think, that is embedded into it. So.
And actually, that was an important point you said about the self-healing, because you raised that as a point in the book about how important our own self-work is in the relationship. That was really
very
strong.
true.
But I wanted to open with actually your opening words, very reminiscent of your Instagram posts. But in the introduction, you say, I see you, I hear you, I'm safe, I'm on your team, I see you, I hear you. Oh my goodness, I went cold when I read that, like a visceral reaction in a beautiful way of what love, what epitome of healthy, secure love. It was beautiful, Julie.
Well, thank you.
Beautiful. And it leads me on to ask you, it sounds like a big question, but what does secure love look like?
Well, there are a lot of ways to define it. I keep trying to play around with the most concise way, but I think it's just a felt sense of ease with with another person most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you kind of, let's say with your romantic partner, right? Because I'm talking about romantic relationships,
Mhm.
but you you just have a confidence that you can reach them when you need to reach them, that they'll show up for you when you really need them, that you feel appreciated, that you know that either you're being emotionally validated in a moment or you feel confident that that will happen when you need it. And,
Mhm.
the opposite of that is kind of, feeling a sense of dis-ease, like you never quite know if your partner's going to be there for you. In interactions, you always sort of felt kind of misunderstood or like you have to hold back on what you're saying. And so, again, to flip back to secure, it's just interactions leave you feeling understood, like I said in that quote, seen, held, validated. And this can all happen, this felt sense and these repeated interactions can happen even when partners are talking about, difficult topics or not necessarily agreeing with how to solve a problem. We still can structure these interactions in a way that our attachment needs are met. And so I would say a secure attachment is met attachment needs, which are again to be understood, to feel validated, to feel appreciated, to feel valued, to feel worthy in your eyes. When that's the overall climate of the relationship, that's a secure state. Now, anybody who's in a secure state, which is what I in other words a secure attachment, there can be ruptures in the relationship. It's just that those couples know how to navigate those ruptures, talk about them in a safe way, and then get back to their climate. And so if you start to have a relationship where the norm starts to become feeling invalidated, feeling insecure, feeling misunderstood, then we start to say, well, maybe that, relationship is now being defined by insecure attachment. And then what happens is as that negative energy builds up, it becomes harder to repair from ruptures.
I love the way you brought in about ruptures and about how they're normal in
Oh,
relationships,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
not for people to think of this fairy tale relationship
Hmm.
where there's no ruptures, no falling out, no tension.
Hmm.
It's how we navigate, though, as you talked about it there about the climate and weather. You used a
Hmm.
great analogy there in the book. Do you want to remind me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I always say, okay, a secure attachment would be kind of like living in San Diego. I don't know how much you know about San Diego, but in the US, San Diego has it's Southern California has it's very south, has this beautiful climate where it's never exceptionally hot or exceptionally cold. And it's just a lot of people want to go live there because it's very mild. But there are times when some really bad weather comes to San Diego. I mean, you'll get, storms and monsoons and all kinds of stuff. But overall, nobody says, oh, it's so rainy in San Diego, even though San Diego gets its share of rain now and then. So it's in, and then what do people do? Well, they deal with the rain, right? They do what they need to do, and then they all kind of restructure themselves back into their normal climate. They know how to survive it. It's not going to tear them apart, and nobody's moving out of San Diego because it, a couple rained for a couple of days. So,
I think that's a really useful analogy
mm,
of the general feeling of the relationship is good and positive,
yes,
and how we
yes.
manage the upset or any slight issues that come in. I think that's brilliant. You talk through the book a lot about attachment styles
Hmm.
from childhood. And I think it's really important to bring in here that the importance that those attachment styles have when they play out in our adult relationships and the attachment wounds we can have from childhood.
Hmm.
And you mentioned in the book, I think the stat was only 50% of us come from a secure attachment base from
Hmm.
childhood. So that leaves
That's the
a
statistic. Yeah.
huge. I think that's relevant in the UK as well. I know that's the US
Hmm.
relevant in the UK. That's a huge amount of people left out there that
It
don't
really is.
have a secure attachment groundings from
Hmm.
childhood. And
Hmm.
I wonder if you just want, in a nutshell, I know it's not easy to do that, but just something around what the attachment styles are, Julie.
Sure. Well, first, let me say this, that 50% that's insecure, it can happen to varying degrees. There really are people that have, elements and parts of their relationship where they struggle and they have some insecure issues, insecure attachment issues. But overall, they're like, it's good enough for us, we're still trying to grow. So, and then you have couples on the other end of that spectrum that are just like entirely distressed. So I always like to say, we all have the grandparents in our family or the older aunt or uncle who, clearly grandma's the one doing all the talking and grandpa doesn't really open up, right? But they've been married for 85 years and they're lovely. Okay. So
Yes.
so it's not all bad or all or nothing in that 50%, but there's always room to grow. So the anxious attachment, they are kind of always sort of aware. They have a strong bodily sense of anything not being right in the relationship.
Okay.
If they get any signal that something isn't going well, they start to feel panicky. They grew up in environments where they really couldn't be sure if their emotional needs were going to be met or not. Maybe got shamed for having big emotions, ignored for having big emotions, kind of a mixed bag of responsiveness. Maybe sometimes they did get responded to. Maybe they got responded to by, here, have some cookies, when they were in distress. But either way, it wasn't really responsiveness that really helped them learn to kind of regulate their nervous systems. And so now in adulthood, their body carries those implicit memories of emotional abandonment and maybe even physical abandonment. And so they're always sort of on alert for it, because if I can be alert and I can catch it when it happens, I can protest to my partner and I can get them to change so they're not triggering this place in me anymore. Right. So their way of getting back on track when they feel distressed is to close the distance, reach frantically, protest, go into blame, hyper focus on what their partner is getting wrong. And, there's a lot of truth to the fact that partners do get things wrong. But what happens is they really self abandon. They're really not tapping in, figuring out what's going on for them, and kind of being able to communicate from that place in a clearer, more regulated way. And, let's say they're angry, that anger comes out reactively instead of assertively. And sometimes they'll go back and forth between reactive anger and stuffing their anger down, or
Okay.
reactive anger and then I should have just never said anything. So yeah. So then we have the avoidant attachment where they really never got responded to, at all growing up. They didn't, it was less of unpredictable and more of just kind of a flat emotional environment a lot of the time. There's some twists on that. Some people, well, let me just finish this line here. So what they have to learn to do is they're like, well, subconsciously from a very young age, they're like, well, nobody's really here to show up for me emotionally. It doesn't really get me anything. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of value in that. So I'm just going to go ahead and stuff this stuff underground
Mhm.
and really not know anything about that part of myself. It's still there. The energy is still there. They're still trying to get those emotional needs met, just not consciously or directly. And so what happens is they end up in relationships, and their way of kind of staying safe from their painful emotions is to deal with the relationship the same way they deal with themselves, which is just, let's push the problems away. Let's not talk about them. If you bring something up to me, I'm going to just kind of tell you why you're seeing it wrong, or tell you what you want to hear so you don't feel bad anymore. They don't really know how to meet the emotions, validate emotions, sit with emotions, either in themselves or in their partner. And so, as you can imagine, these two come together for a lot of good reasons that anxious and avoidant end up finding each other.
Don't they?
Yeah, it's pretty profound. I mean, I don't see couples who don't have some level of an anxious avoidant dynamic. I don't know if they don't exist. I don't know there's a lot to say about that, but
Yes.
everyone who comes to me has it to some degree. I think if they don't start off with it, they co-create it because it's an emotional balancing act.
I wonder if it's because we're seeing that in the therapy room, because they're the sorts that will actually end up seeking therapy. Whereas if someone is more secure, they might be able
Hmm.
to. So one of the partners is secure, they might
Hmm.
be able to help with the one that's anxious or avoidant.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a secure attachment, I mean, by default, you know how to be safe in a
Yeah.
relationship. And so that can actually help your partner develop a secure attachment because the safe environment
Yeah.
is enough to help them self-reflect and grow, which is part of what I'm trying to put out in the book. It's like, look, it takes two to create a healthy relationship, but one person truly can start becoming a safe presence and create relation or environmental safety that can help that other person start to go, when we're in fights and arguments and all of this toxic, environment all the time, as you know, I mean, our energy is just constantly going into protect, protect, protect. And when you start to create a safe environment and free up that energy, people really do. I do believe humans have an inherent desire to grow. It's just we need them to be in the environment that's going to encourage that. But it can go the other way too. If you have someone with a relatively secure attachment and they somehow find themselves in a relationship with someone who is not, they could start to kind of develop an insecure attachment too. It really can go
Oh,
both ways. I think it's more likely that someone with a secure attachment brings them both up.
it's that beautiful mirrored behavior, isn't it, as well? It's
Yes. Yeah.
inspirational for the one that isn't. It's like, oh, how can I be more like that? That it's a gift, that co-regulation they get from it, isn't it? So it's healing in itself. Um,
Absolutely. And too, with clients, y- you know that probably most of the clients we see, I'm sure your experiences is that your secure presence brings them up. It helps them feel safe. They open up. But then we have those clients that, you know, get the worst. They're very distressed and they pull the worst of us. And, that we have to really be on top of that. But,
do
I would,
we do and
so
really
yeah, it's very
catch
similar.
ourselves in the moment, like what's going on
Yes,
for us in this moment, and really have
exactly.
supervision to kind of work out what's
Yes.
happening. Yeah, of course. Okay, so how important, you talk about this in the book, and I love the way you described it, but I want to put the question out there. How important is it for us to understand the attachment style of our partner?
I think that it is extremely important to understand insecure attachment. I do believe that it's very, very, very useful to understand, if your partner has an avoidant attachment, or if your partner has an anxious attachment, this is where they're coming from. This is why it makes sense. But there are these people who aren't going to really, it shows up murky or there's overlap. They don't fit perfectly into those categories. And then what I'm finding is people start to get really confused and then they start to kind of fixate on understanding the exact style. And what I try to tell people in that situation is just look, if you have an insecure attachment, look at all of the ways it can show up, whether it shows up in an anxious way or if it shows up in an avoidant way. Look at all the different childhoods, things that can kind of go wrong that can create an insecure attachment, and just work with what is, work with
Yeah.
what you're seeing. If, your partner is kind of shutting down and during an argument, work on that. Try to read about insecure attachment or attachment styles in general and just kind of understand what's going on with them. So yes and no. I think 80% of the time it's extraordinarily useful, but it becomes not useful when people get caught in the weeds with labels, I think.
Okay.
So I
Oh,
try to
okay.
kind of balance, I don't know if
Balance.
I'm making sense, but I
You
try to kind
are.
of balance that out. Yeah, because I don't want people to kind of look at these attachment styles and go, well, that's too rigid. My partner didn't, nobody fits in these boxes. I don't fit in the box. And then just kind of abandon attachment theory altogether.
Yeah.
Because to me, it is the closest science has come to explaining how relationships work. So I just like to say, look, if these boxes don't resonate with you, just learn about attachment theory without the styles. I'm not saying that very clearly, but
No, 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 you are. And actually you really are, Julie. And I like that, as opposed to getting too boxed in, where
yes.
people can become so fixated. It's more, and as you were talking there, I thought it's actually more about if we can just try to understand our partner.
Yes.
Try
Yes.
and see it from their perspective or their lived experience of why this might hurt in the moment or why they
Yes.
get defensive. So to kind of free ourselves of the label of avoidant or, but I
Yes.
do have a lovely story actually from it, and I do have permission to use this. It's from a
Okay.
client. And it really made me resonate with a part of your book about when we understand the other, a situation can change hugely about how we feel about them in relationship. And my
Hmm.
client arrived and she does have an anxious attachment, did have a very anxious attachment, and was ready to leave her partner because
Hmm.
her partner would not communicate with her.
Hmm.
And we did a little bit of trying to look behind the partner, what was behind,
Wow.
what was causing them to not talk about themselves, not talk about their needs. And when she revealed his upbringing,
Hmm.
and he'd lost his mother very young,
Hmm.
brought up by his grandmother and an only child, there was an emotionally unavailable father.
Hmm.
He was very avoidant. He didn't, if we, I mean, drop the label, he didn't really know how to communicate his needs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when we talked about this, she just literally said, I need to call him. I don't want to break up with him anymore. The
Oh, that's
shame
so
in
touching.
but that we see that, don't
Yeah.
we, in couples therapy? If
Oh
we
my gosh. Yes. Yeah.
have the capacity to see the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wrote the book with a lot of self-help strategies, words you can say, new ways to communicate. And I'm really trying to put that philosophical idea out of really understanding and let's have this change be born of empathy and understanding and wisdom and love instead of necessarily just saying the right words, which you write a self-help book, you've got to put the right words in there, right? And people need the words. But I think what happens a lot of times is the philosophy and the heartfelt sense is not on board when people are delivering those words. And so I have this podcast of my own, which is my working with, 20 sessions with one couple. And I really love that it's showing, I'm getting chills just saying this. I love that, as we're progressing through, I think I've recorded session 5, but session 2 is coming out today. But it's really showing that as I just facilitate these conversations between the two of them that are nothing more right now in this stage of the work than just understanding each other. Like it is truly healing them. I have not spent 1 second saying, okay, say these words to each other at home. We might get to that point. We might not, because a lot of that I'm just doing in the session, facilitating new interactions. But it really truly does show that just that understanding and empathy piece can be so incredibly healing in and of itself. Just kind of what you're describing.
It's beautiful. I'm looking forward to listening to that podcast, Julie.
Oh yeah, the
What an
episode
incredible
one's out.
what an incredible podcast to produce and put out in the world to help.
Oh yeah, it feels like the culmination of everything I am in the world feels like this podcast. I mean, yeah, I just can't even tell you. It's one couple, one real couple, and we do 20 sessions. So,
It's
because I really want people to see how not just one glimpse of one session. I
yeah.
want them to see how it all kind of plays out. Not leave people going, well, what happened? What happens next?
That's reminding me of that incredible, which actually really inspired me to do couples therapy, was that incredible documentary with, oh, I can't remember her name now. I want to say Olga, but I don't think it is. The couples therapy. Oh, it was
Oh,
called
is it like Netflix or?
Netflix called Couples Therapy.
Yes,
There were 2 seasons. Absolutely.
yes.
I think I binge watched it in 2 days. I was absolutely, this is the work I want to do. It was
Oh, amazing,
so
amazing. I never watched. I keep hearing about it, but
you must. And
yeah.
you need your own TV show, clearly.
Did she do the same couple or
Yeah.
did she do different couples?
So
Okay.
she took, I think there were 5 or 6 couples
Hmm.
selected, and then she followed those through on a journey.
Okay.
So
I see.
seasons,
Okay.
incredible. And some of it was through COVID, so that was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
How the
Wow. Yeah,
impact
I'll
of
have
the
to check that
pandemic.
out.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the importance of understanding our needs and
Hmm.
communicating our needs in a relationship, particularly in ruptures. And I loved your example of Jen and Andrew in the book.
Hmm.
And I love the way you bring in those examples because it really gives us sort of lived material to look at,
Sure.
case studies. And you talked about them having a discussion about a set of keys. And then it
Hmm.
escalated into an argument that had nothing to do with the keys
Sure.
because there was so much bubbling underneath
Hmm.
the surface around resentment, anger,
Hmm.
unmet needs. That plays such a part in relationships, doesn't it? That very
Everything.
often the
Yeah.
argument is not about the thing that's been brought to the room.
Right. Most of the time it isn't. And yes, problems are real. I mean, we really do need to decide, where the kids are going to go to school, or we really do need to figure out a budget for finances. But what happens is when couples don't know how to communicate in a way that's emotionally safe and keeps those attachment needs intact. My needs matter to you. You feel appreciated by me. You feel emotionally validated. Then they can't even get to the actual finance conversation because they're too busy fighting for their emotional needs to be met. And so, what I have found is that when we can get couples connected and bonded and be able to maintain that through conversations where they might not see eye to eye, like who's going to put the keys away or why didn't you put the keys away, that stuff just, it really a lot of times just starts to sort of take care of itself. Or they can, come together in a safe place and compromise or figure something out. So yeah,
Mm.
are there situations where at the end of the day they're so far apart that it can't work? Sure, that happens. I mean, there are certain times where there's just core incompatibility, but we have no idea if that's the case if we first don't clean up this communication and get them being safe with each other.
And that communication in safety is so key, isn't it? Because
It's everything. Yeah.
if you don't feel safe, you won't dip your toe in that difficult communication, will you? You won't.
No, you either won't dip your toe in it or you'll hold it in until it's exploding out of you and you'll go in hot and desperate. We have to get this solved right now. So yeah, it's like those two kind of extremes.
Extremes. The Embody Lab is an online resource for embodied education, self-discovery and healing, founded by Dr. Scott Lyons, a renowned author and expert in holistic psychology and mind-body medicine. The Embody Lab is committed to making somatics and trauma healing accessible to everyone by offering virtual events, summits and certificates. The Embody Lab empowers individuals to embark on their own journey of personal growth and transformation through a diverse digital catalogue of programs and resources. Explore exclusive teachings from world-renowned experts like Gabor Mate, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, Diane Paul Heller, and more. Join the Embody Lab community to deepen your healing path. I'm a huge fan of the Embody Lab, and just for you, I have a special code which gives you 10% off all of their courses, and that's Helen6788. The Embody Lab truly is a wonderful resource for your healing journey. Actually, I'm dancing ahead. You brought in a great tip for repair work.
Mm-hmm.
And you called it evict.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to just, I think the listeners will love that because that's got something that they can really hold on to.
Sure. Yeah. If I think of it as like evicting shame, I think of shame as kind of driving all of this. So when people are communicating in a way that isn't healthy, they're really doing a lot of shame work with each other, negative shame work.
Yeah.
And so if we can start communicating with each other in ways that are dissolving shame and relieving shame. And instead of sending messages, there's something wrong with you, you're unlovable, you're not worthy, we're now using our communication to send messages of you're valuable to me, you're lovable, your needs matter, you're worthy. You don't have to hide yourself, then shame just blocks, all communication, all effective communication. And so when we can start de-shaming, then things, real magic can happen. People not only are able to really hear each other and understand each other and get more clear about what it is they're actually wanting. They start becoming more flexible with each other too, and even more assertive with each other if needed. Sometimes we need to have boundaries and draw lines, and that can come from a place of healthy assertion. And so the evict, shame are just these real tangible skills. Like, you want to make sure that you're speaking from a place of empathy. Like, I need to get my heart into a place where I'm understanding your feelings, even if I don't, necessarily agree with everything you have to say. I'm willing to kind of understand where you're coming from. Emotional validation. You're sending messages that, hey, we might not see eye to eye on the way to manage our money together, but I recognize how scary it is for you to think of losing everything. You grew up in a home of poverty. You had to kind of walk around being constantly worried about, the next day mom losing her job and having to go, to a shelter or whatever. Like, people have good reasons to need to be incredibly frugal with their money. And so the validation can look like the flip side. Like, I really understand, having a nice home is part of how you feel safe in the world. And it makes sense to me that you want to put money into, beauty or whatever. Like, we're just validating each other's experiences that are driving our ideas about the situation. And curiosity is part of that. I'm trying to remember all the the
Do
letters,
you want me
but
to let me do it because
sure.
I've got it turned over. Just
I
so
know
you
curiosity.
empathy, validation, which we've done, vulnerability.
Oh,
It's a
vulnerability.
double V.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. I need to sleep really cold. Like, I need I would be happy if my air conditioner was on like 67, to sleep at night. But the rest of my family doesn't really want the house being at 67, when they're going about their evenings. I typically go to bed earlier than others. And so, anyway, so my husband comes in 2 nights ago, and it was I live in Montana, which is a cold part of the US. And so it wasn't super hot outside. So he comes in and opens the balcony door in our bedroom because he's cold downstairs. And something happened in me that I felt really triggered. I felt like, he's turning the air off. Like, the scared old part of me, this shadow part of me started to say, he doesn't care about my needs. He doesn't care about me, sleeping well and all these things. And of course, that wasn't true, but because I have this work and this self-awareness, and I can, I can go to that place of vulnerability. And instead of saying, you don't even care about me, or turn that back on, or whatever, any kind of like protesty response, or just not saying anything and holding resentment,
Yeah.
I was able to kind of check in and then say to him, there's this part of me gets really scared in those moments that, like, my needs don't matter to you. That's what happens for me. And just, why did I put words to it? No other reason than just being vulnerable with each other, connecting. And, he was just able to say, oh, of course your needs matter to me. And it just kind of dissolved all of those feelings, just really, I guess, in the moment, just putting words to that. And then having a message come back from him that's like, of course your needs matter to me, instead of just that energy kind of holding. And in the past, with us, years ago, that could have turned into a thing, right? Because then he's going, well, what about my needs to not be cold downstairs? And, it just goes back and forth. So it's little pieces like that where you can share. And I have to know about that part of me before I can put words to it.
I love the real lived moment you shared there,
Mm-hmm.
but also the importance of the way your vulnerability was met.
Yes, absolutely.
So
It has to
that
go
was
both
huge.
ways. Yeah.
Yes, it's the
Yes.
reciprocation, isn't it? The fact
Yes.
when
Yes.
you're vulnerable, he hears you.
Mhm.
And when he's vulnerable, you hear him. It's that both ways. That was wonderful
Yes.
to hear.
And we're helping each other, right? Because I'm helping him hear me because I'm delivering it. I'm packaging it in a way that's not, you're the bad guy, you're this, you're selfish, you're obtuse, you know? And so I'm helping him out. And then he's helping me be vulnerable by responding positively to that. So it's just this constant helping each other out
And you,
process.
and you can really see it shift and change, can't you? I'm reflecting
Hmm.
on my own marriage here and thinking, pre-therapist Helen
Hmm.
never express her vulnerability.
Oh,
So there were
yeah.
far more ruptures
Yeah.
because I'd shut down or I wouldn't communicate what I felt. And then when I learned that actually effective communication and it's heard, the whole relationship shifts.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
so powerful. So
It
I love
is.
I
It
love
is.
that about vulnerability. And then there was influence, curiosity, and tolerance.
Yeah, so influences, just being able to hear, influence each other's perspectives. I think Gottman said that the most successful couples are one hallmark of a successful couple is when, let's just say in a hetero couple, right? I don't know how it plays out non-hetero, but when the male allows himself to be influenced by the female. And it doesn't mean it's out of balance. What he's saying is like females are already typically influenced by the male in the relationship. And so it really kind of hinges on if the male can be influenced by the female. And that's just, we need to know that we have an impact on our partner. We need to know that our ideas and the way we think can get through and that they'll take that into consideration. And then tolerance, just grace, just giving grace. Like you're not always going to get it right. Maybe my husband, instead of marching in and opening the door, which, whatever, like that's not the end of the world, but maybe he could have been said, "Hey, honey, we're cold down here. Do you mind if I open the door?" But he didn't. And I can give him grace in that moment that, and or any of number of things where I drop the ball and don't show up as my best self. We can tolerate that. And, you know, what do we call it? I like how Becky Kennedy calls it the most generous interpretation.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean ignore problems. It just means, you know, give each other grace when a real big issue comes up, definitely address it. Oh, curiosity is huge. I mean, just really being able, I'll give you another example of my personal life. My husband is one of these guys that's always complaining about the state of the world. He's always just this is wrong and this is wrong. He just needs to get it out, right? And so there are times when I start to go, "Oh my God, I don't want to hear about what's wrong with the world anymore." Like, or I don't agree with his perspective or something. And I just want to dive in there and be like, "Well, why don't you just see it a little more positively?" Or blah, blah. And so the other day we were walking and I felt myself get triggered and I thought, no, I'm not gonna try to move him away from this. And I just instead it started to be really curious about well, help me understand, like when you see this thing happen that you're complaining about, like what happens for you. And we were able, by just me being curious about his world, to get to this place where it really tied into like his childhood stuff and something about this thing that he was experiencing that was taking him into it shouldn't be like that, was about some childhood wounds. And he actually started to get teared up, which is not, he's not someone who does that a lot. And so it was like I would have missed this beautiful opportunity to get to know him better had I just gone into, come on, look at the bright side. And sometimes maybe I would do that. It's not necessarily about right or wrong, but because I was able to go that route of curiosity, not only was I able to see him better, but what was really beautiful was seeing him see himself more clearly. That was the most beautiful piece.
But your curiosity using your evict. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Your evict. When you
Oh, acronym.
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 Gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your eviction.
I always want to say an acronym, which is totally different. So yeah.
But your evict shame acronym is so helpful. I want to ask some questions for my Instagram community that I know that I sent to you. But do you think that that evict shame part is a really important step in how you move towards a secure relationship? Because what we're trying to do,
Mhm.
isn't it, here, is show people that they don't have to stay stuck in insecure relationships.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that evict shame is a huge stepping stone, isn't it, of moving
Mhm.
forward to secure.
Huge. Yeah.
What other things
Well,
would you
and
say?
think about it like this too. That is exactly what we're doing with our clients is we're communicating with evict shame. I mean, we're validating them, we're having empathy for them, we're being curious with them, we're, encouraging their vulnerability. Maybe sometimes we go into our own vulnerability. And why does this stuff need to be stuck between therapist and client? Why are we not giving the same skills to couples or friends or whatever. But I forgot your question.
No, no,
Sorry.
no. I was talking about that. How do we move from insecure to secure?
Hmm.
And actually, when you're looking, I'm sort of answering the question myself, and I don't mean to do that, but as I'm thinking
Oh,
out loud, is when you're using the evict shame model,
hmm.
if things are really difficult for you within that evict shame model,
Hmm.
that's where you're highlighting your own self-work, isn't it? And that's something to get really
Absolutely.
curious about.
Yes.
So
Yes.
sometimes you need to step away from the couple relationship and look at what you need to be working on too.
Absolutely. And that's really what I'm doing with all the couples I treat is I'm looking for their own, not just the emotional blocks between the two of them, which would be, getting around that block would be adding in more of this evict shame type of dialogue. But what is the block in you that's getting in your way in this moment of curiosity? Like, let's say I'm on the walk with my husband and, instead of going into curiosity, I don't, what's going on in me that's blocking that? Some trigger, something really important is happening in me. I'm being triggered by something he said. Sometimes it's just not knowing how, but that's a place where I want to help each partner kind of dig into themselves and say, what gets in the way of you
Yeah,
validating here?
yeah,
Right? Maybe there's a belief that, well, if I jump in and validate you, that means all of a sudden my needs don't matter anymore. And
yeah,
then I just help them share that. Like, yeah, I want to be able to validate you. I would love for us to get to this way that we could beautifully communicate. But something does happen inside of me where, I start to fear that if I validate you, my needs won't matter to you anymore. And just putting words to that, helping them understand, see these patterns more clearly, usually helps people start to move out of them.
and you said there, which was so key, put words.
Put words. Yes,
Put
absolutely.
words.
Put
That's the
words. Yeah,
starting point, isn't it? Well, I suppose awareness is the starting point,
sure.
self-awareness, but then put words. Julia, I've loved this discussion and I've got lots more I want to ask you, but I'm so aware of your time. And I wanted to ask you some questions from my Instagram community.
Sure.
I don't think I've ever had so many questions come in when I've put something out about a podcast. And the couples therapy questions that came in were just
Oh, yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of them from my community.
Wow.
Relationships really matter, don't
They
they?
do.
They
They
really matter.
do.
We're
Yeah.
all, and you say in your book so beautifully, we're all wanting a secure relationship. We all
Yes.
want that love. We all want to be seen. But what I loved was the questions were really people wanting to know a bit more about how they could work through. Um,
Hmm.
so I won't ask them all because there were many, but the
Yeah.
ones I picked out, the first one was how do, and actually this came up quite a lot, which is sad, but how do couples overcome trust issues after infidelity? And I know that's a big
Yeah.
question, but what comes to mind for you when you hear someone ask that?
That is probably the most common question I get
Okay.
also. Maybe not the most common, but definitely top five. It is possible to heal from past wounds. We need two things to happen. We need one, behavior change. We can't have that behavior being ongoing. Obviously, that doesn't do anything to build trust. But assuming that the person is no longer having the affair, it requires a series of healing conversations. And those conversations have to have certain elements to them. I have an Instagram post called What Are Attachment Wounds and How to Heal, which really outlines the process as much as I can, in our 10 slides that we get. I have a chapter in the book about healing, and they're conversations where we're creating the healing environment. Are there guarantees? Absolutely not. Sometimes people wound each other to the degree that is just not going to be possible for them to trust again. But what I have found is if someone really wants to, they can get there. If a couple really wants to, they can get to that point. And so we need these conversations to happen in a certain way, meaning the wounded partner is communicating in a certain way and the wounding partner is responding and also communicating in a certain way. And then we need to understand that this is going to need repeated healthy conversations. We need to know when the wound flares that, hey, I can reach to you and I'm going to get support around these bad feelings I have around this event. And you're not going to tell me, well, we've already talked about it. And what happens is when they start having healthy conversations and they go in the right way, they need to have them less over time. But we also need to make sure that we have plenty of space where, when those triggers come up, we have a safe place to go and support each other. And that is, again, creating the environment that increases the odds that we will be able to move past these wounds. I love Esther Perel's TED Talk on infidelity. She really helps people make sense of infidelity and help them kind of understand that, look, this can be an opportunity. If we can do this in the right way, navigate this in the right way, this can be an opportunity to have a whole new relationship that's way healthier than it was pre-affair.
I love the way, obviously Esther's word about we can have a way healthier relationship going forward. But I loved your point, and I think it's so important. The couple, the two people have to want it to work.
Yes, absolutely.
That was great, Julie. Thank you. My debut book, Choose You, is out now. In this book, I guide you through the theory behind the way you are, so you develop a deeper understanding of who you are. I help you connect with your authentic self, understand your attachment style to yourself and to others. I help you cultivate a kindness to self, learn to set boundaries, show up for yourself, heal from heartbreak, befriend your nervous system, and find ways to seek authentic connections. I truly believe that we can't connect fully with others if we don't truly understand our own needs and desires. Choose You helps you find the answers you've been looking for. Choose You, out now. I thought this was interesting because love languages comes up a lot on social media, doesn't it?
Yes.
How important are shared love languages? But how important is it to love someone through their love language?
Well, it's interesting because I read recently that the authors of the book actually wrote the book for people to help their partner, not fixate on their partner meeting their love language, which I thought was because so much of this love language information can so easily be weaponized. You're not getting me enough flowers. And there's a couple, I have complicated views on that book. For one, the very last interview that Sue Johnson did with Jimmy on relationships before she passed, she said, there's no amount of cutting the grass that's going to make up for partners not being able to meet each other's emotional needs.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I loved that.
Brilliant.
And at the same time, when I look out the window and I see my husband cutting our grass, I do feel happy that I do. I think, well, that's great. He takes such good care of his family in our home. And, so I don't think it's all or nothing, but I definitely think there is something under the love languages that needs to be addressed. And if that's not addressed, the communication issues, the real emotional vulnerability that's being transmitted verbally and physically, if that's not happening, flowers every day isn't going to cure the problem.
No, I know words of affirmation aren't going to. And I think you're so right. It's so important to remember it's about having a level of understanding about the way our partner wants to be loved, meeting their needs.
Yes,
But the
yes,
reciprocation of that, isn't it? It can't be just
yes.
one way.
No, no, definitely not.
Julie, thank you. I have
Oh,
just
you're
loved
so
this
welcome, Helen.
conversation. And I have just one more final question that I ask
Sure.
all my guests, which is, what does it mean to you to choose you?
I think what it means for me is being extraordinarily aware of my limitations. I've lived my life up to really very recently having this sort of idea that if I just try hard enough, I can check all the boxes. If I just try hard enough, I can do it all. And I've really had to step back from that in the last few months and realize, wow, like I really can't do everything. I gotta, and so what it's helped me do is really clarify what I really truly care about and focus in on what I really truly care about. And for me, that's helped me just release a lot of pressure on myself and stress and has really taken, helped me eliminate some things in my life that were kind of semi-important, but getting in the way of the things that were really truly important. And
Yeah.
so it's required me to be really gentle on myself, really accepting of limitations, but it's been very freeing. And
God,
so sometimes people will come over some like when I start getting sensing, people want something from me that I can't give them or whatever, it's like it's easier for me to be forgiving of myself because if I give this person, over here, all of this, it's coming out of what I really care about the most, which is my relationships with my kids and my husband.
yes.
So
That real honing in on the priorities that matter, isn't it?
absolutely.
That,
Yes.
but I loved
Yeah.
the way you said it felt so freeing. I saw your entire body language shift as you said it.
Yeah.
It
It
was
really
there,
does.
wasn't it? It
Yeah.
really does, doesn't it? And Julie, thank you so much for today.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I've just loved chatting with you and to meet you as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah, likewise. Like I said, you're just always such a positive energy in my life. Just seeing your little H dot each dot just makes me happy. So,
And if you ever come to London,
oh, absolutely.
let's
It's
meet for
funny because I
coffee.
did come to London in February and I
Oh,
thought about reaching out. I really
oh,
did. I thought about reaching out, but
oh,
I
Julie,
don't know. I'm always like, I don't want to bug people, but
no,
um,
the invitation
yeah,
is
so
genuine. Please do.
okay, for sure. Yeah,
Love it.
definitely.
Okay, well, I'll let you go, but thank you so
Okay, well, thank you so much. And tell Gia thank you.
I will do. Take care. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye
Bye.
bye.